Hi friends, welcome to another 5 Minutes of Hope. I'm the reluctant missiologist, and we've been talking about how to have hope, unshakable hope in these troubled times. And with that, we've recently started a Facebook group, Unshakable Hope. So you can search for this group. It's a public group. It's there so you can ask questions. You can ask, how do I have hope in this time? Or you can share stories of how you are having hope, where you're seeing God at work in your life in this time. So get on and keep the conversation going. But for today's video, I want to share a personal story of where I felt God interact in my life. In the moment, it didn't feel hopeful. But as I look back, I see what God was doing and find hope in this story. It was when I was 20 years old. So some years ago, I was 20 years old and I'd recently lost my eyesight. At 17 years old, I was called into ministry. And now 3 years later, my eyesight was going. And it had gone. And it had been several months. And during this time, I really lost a lot of stuff. I was no longer working. I was no longer able to drive. There's a lot of things I couldn't do. And in this time, from time to time, I'd go visit a friend who was a youth pastor, and I'd just hang out with him. It was just good to have a friend to hang out with no agenda. And so on the Sunday night that I was up there, it was their youth group night, and worship was happening. And in worship, that's where I often would feel closest to God. And still, that's often where I feel closest to God. And in this moment, I was worshiping and just pouring my heart out to God. And I really felt close to God. And I started reflecting and thinking, God, you called me into ministry. You called me into missions when I was 17. Now this 3 years later, I've lost my eyesight, God. What's happening? And so I said, God, you called me. You're going to have to heal me if you want to use me. Like, I know you want to use me, so obviously you're going to heal me, is what I was thinking. I didn't know if I could just lay out my case before him and convince him. Maybe I thought that. I don't know what was going on, but I was hoping that would be the case. That, well, God surely knew what he was doing, and something went wrong. Something had altered the plan. Whatever was going to happen, now it can't, because I can't see. And so I thought, surely God would fix his plan by fixing me, healing me. And God does fix things, and he does heal. He is a healing God. But it doesn't always work according to our plan. But I didn't know what was going to happen. And maybe I was thinking, well, somehow God's surprised. But the reality is, he's not surprised. He's not sitting up there in heaven going, oh, I had great ideas for this guy, and all of a sudden I don't know what to do because he's lost his eyesight. How am I going to make it work out? And he's scrambling. He's getting his people together, his second lieutenant, trying to figure out what can we do. That's not how it works for God. He knew who I was when he called me, and he knew what was going to happen. He wasn't surprised in the least. And so for me in this moment, I'm in worship and I'm pouring my heart out, and it happened in a moment of probably 30 seconds, this whole conversation. But as I look back, there's probably a lot of thoughts going on, but it didn't take long for me to get to, God, you're going to either have to heal me to use me, and a little pause. And I probably was impressed by God to say that this part, it wasn't on my own. I said, or you'll have to use me in spite of this. Use me in spite of this. I don't know why I said that in the moment, and I probably was hoping that wasn't going to be the case. That God would heal me. Maybe not the next day or the next week, but he'd heal me soon so I could get back to doing what he called me to. Now what's interesting is when I was 19 and involved in my church, I was volunteering a lot of different things in my church. I was working. I was hanging out with friends. I was going everywhere at the same time as I was going nowhere. I knew I was called into ministry, but I wasn't really accomplishing all that God had for me when I could see. And all of a sudden, when I couldn't see, I got focused on doing one thing, because I knew that God had called me into ministry. And I said, God, my life is yours, whether I can see or whether I can't see. And I didn't know how it was going to unfold. I didn't know how I would do anything, because I didn't know how I could be a minister who is blind. But it turns out I can, And over the past 23 years, God has used me in multiple different ways and is continuing to use me. And so sometimes things seem like, oh, it's all falling apart. Nothing's going to work. And yet God is faithful. And He does have a plan. And He's still at work. And He's still right there with you. And so no matter where you're at in this time, as you're sitting and watching this or wherever you're at, God is still right there with you. And it may not feel like it at the moment. It might feel completely the opposite of that. But one day you can look back and say, God has been with me all the way through. So keep grabbing onto Jesus in these times, and we'll talk again soon.